Now on to our interviews. We had requested them from both Governor Crist and Marco Rubio. After initially agreeing to a sit-down interview, Crist backed out. Rubio agreed to meet up with us Friday in Clearwater, Florida. First of all, welcome. I really appreciate your being here. I wanted to start out by something that really is a threat to Florida as well as Mississippi and Louisiana, and that's the oil spill that we're seeing now as it moves its way toward shore. Are you convinced that the administration has been into this quickly enough, and has it done enough?
Well, I want to be fair to the administration. I think a lot of the early news about the spill was coming from the company, from BP, and I think they were either inaccurate or shortcoming in some of the things they were saying early on. Since that time, of course, over the last few days, we've seen the administration move aggressively, and I hope aggressively enough. Now, they have information I don't have. They know things perhaps we don't know. And so during an emergency, you're always cautious not to be critical because you don't want to appear to be unfair. This is an ecological disaster. It's a crisis. It looks like it may eclipse the Exxon Valdez situation, and I hope it is dealt with quickly, rapidly, effectively, not just for Louisiana, but also for Florida. I know a state of emergency has been declared here.
Now, do you see BP being responsible for anything, particularly the late alert that, in fact, there was oil leaking under the water?
Well, again, I always want to be fair. I'm deeply concerned. Early on, it appeared that they were saying it was 1,000 barrels, and now later on we got word it was as much as 5,000 barrels. There's obviously something went terribly wrong. I mean, this is not a commonplace occurrence, and so something happened there.
And you have been for more offshore drilling. Does this make you rethink that?
I think it makes us rethink the technologies of offshore drilling. And certainly this thing...
Because wasn't that the deal? Oh, technology is so much better now. The chances of a spill aren't as great. This was a relatively new rig. It just seems that it's really not that safe.
Well, we don't know what it was using and not using. There's been some initial reports that perhaps it did not have all the up-to-date technology that you would have. But again, I don't want to jump to any conclusions and then later on find out I was wrong. Let me say that we do want to find out what happened. And certainly there's a lot of offshore drilling going on all over the world right now, and this isn't happening every day. Something went terribly wrong here, and hopefully it's not something that's commonplace.
And would you stop any idea of leasing areas now for offshore drilling or any building until we find out?
Well, I think it's premature to make statements like that. I will say, however, that I hope the inquiry will be taken seriously. I'm sure that it will. And we're going to wait for all that to happen before we, make hard-edged pronouncements on what the future should be with regards to this.
Let me ask you a little bit about immigration, because Arizona and the new law there has really brought this to the forefront. I was interested that Congressman Connie Mack put out a statement, and he compared this law to the Gestapo stopping people on the street and demanding their papers. He said it should not be against the law not to have your papers. Would you agree with that?
I thought it was inevitable something like this would happen, not just in Arizona, but perhaps in Texas and California and in other border states that are now dealing with the consequences of an uncontrolled border and the violence that's happening in Mexico. That being said, I don't think this law is the best way to do this. I think the best way to deal with this is for the federal government once and for all to do its job in sealing the border. Not even from an immigration perspective. I think there's been a lot of attention given to this from an immigration perspective. It's actually become a national security law enforcement issue for the people of Arizona and in many of the other border states. So no, this law is not the best way to solve this. The best way to solve this is for the federal government once and for all to instill the level of border security, particularly on the Mexican border, to make those border states finally feel secure.
Specifically, what don't you like about the Arizona law?
Well, I think we all had concerns early on about the idea that folks could get pulled over because they would fit a certain profile. Since that time, we've seen the Arizona legislature has taken even further steps to clarify the law. And let me be clear, I don't believe that was their intent. I believe the intent of this law was clearly to deal with what they view as a law enforcement emergency. I don't view this as a law that was intended to profile anybody, but I do think sometimes there are unintended consequences in laws, and I'm glad to see that the Arizona legislature has moved to further clarify language as the week went on.
Okay, Marco Rubio, we want to come back and talk a little state politics and some national politics right after this.